Hey everybody, this is Joshua Orro, host of Mustang Prince Orro Reports. Joining me for this episode is my good friend, the movie fan.
Hey guys, movie fan here.
Also joining us is a newcomer to my show. Please welcome the host of Jay's Watch, Jonathan Cohen, the reviewer.
Greetings, everyone. I'm Jonathan the Reviewer from Jay's Watch, and I'm happy to be here to team up with movie fan and Joshua Orro.
Fun fact, Jonathan was the one who introduced me to the movie fan and several other reviewers via Google Chat.
You're welcome, Joshua. So what exactly are we going to talk about today?
Now today, for the first time since 2021, I'm doing a new countdown video. What of, you ask? Well, let's discuss one of my favorite directors of all time, visionary director Tim Burton.
Now, when it comes to Tim Burton, I don't think there's anyone who doesn't know the name because he has done so many great movies throughout the years. Mostly the macabre, but hey, he's good at it. But a lot of people may not know this, but his career really started off back in the late 80s with a movie called Pee-wee's Big Adventure. That's right. He was responsible for the Pee Wee Herman movie. After that, his career launched off with so many great films, ranging from The Ghost Whose Name You Repeat 3 Times, all the way to the Cape Crusader himself, and so many other great films.
Ah, yes, Tim Burton. He is, without a doubt, one of my absolute favorite movie directors. He has an incredible, dark, twisted imagination to make his movies that are enjoyable to watch. His artistic style and use of German expressionism in his movies are so fantastic, and very well detailed. Not only that, he's also an incredible artist. His drawings are incredibly fascinating. In fact, his movies, and his drawings became so popular that it got exhibitions from art museums, a restaurant/bar in both Hollywood and in New York called the Beale House, and concerts, including one that was live from the Lincoln Center in New York, which was aired on PBS, called Danny Elfman's Music from the Films of Tim Burton, which I hope that someday will get it released on DVD. In my opinion, Tim Burton is not only one of the most famous directors of all time, but he's also one of the most imaginative filmmakers in Hollywood history.
To me, Tim Burton's movies can range from fun and heartwarming to mostly weird, dark, scary, and eccentric. And today, I've picked out 13 of them to see which one is the all-time best and my absolute favorite. Now, if anyone out there disagrees with us, then it's okay. We all have our own tastes. And if any of your favorite Tim Burton films are not on this list, it's mainly because I haven't seen them yet. So, you ready, guys?
I sure am.
I'm so ready for this. Let's get started.
Awesome. So, for all you at home, get ready to be freaked out and shocked, for this is the top 13 Tim Burton films.
It's showtime.
Now, what better way to kick off the list than by visiting an eccentric world hidden deep underneath England? Now, we must be perfectly clear that this isn't technically a remake to the 1951 animated Disney classic. It's more like a standalone sequel to the original Lewis Carroll books. Taking place about 14 years after her first visit, 19-year-old Alice Kingsley stumbles into a rabbit hole while chasing a white rabbit during a garden party. Upon arriving in Underland, not only does Alice reunite with the characters whom she met when she was little, but she also learns that it's her destiny to slay the Jabberwocky in order to end the Red Queen's reign of terror. Now, the reason why this movie is on the bottom of the list is because the plot is a tad similar to the first Narnia movie, along with Oz the Great and Powerful and the Nutcracker in the Four Realms. What do you guys think?
Well, honestly, I never thought about that before, but now that you mention it, it does feel similar to the Chronicles of Narnia, because here she is being brought into this world, and apparently it's her destiny to end all the evil in Wonderland. Which in the Chronicles of Narnia, that's what the Pevensies were there for, to end the White Witch's reign of terror.
You know, I agree with you guys, and it does seem interesting that this movie is similar to the Chronicles of Narnia. And as for both Oz the Great and Powerful and the Nutcracker and the Four Realms, I haven't seen them, but I will check them out when I get the time. As for my thoughts on the film, well, after rewatching it just recently, I find this to be a really good movie. I also would like to thank Bonnie from Joy Unicycle for watching this movie with me in theaters back in 2010.
But aside from that, the main reason why this movie is on the list is for several reasons. Firstly, as I said in my blog, this was the very first movie that I ever saw in IMAX 3D. And I want to thank my Aunt Debbie for taking me to see it back in 2010. And I think the scenery in Wonderland, yes, I still prefer to call it that, is very twisted, which is what Tim Burton is known for.
That's true. When it comes to Tim Burton, everything is the macabre. I mean, who else could take the legendary Cheshire Cat and actually make him look creepy?
I agree with you, movie fan. And like I said before, Tim Burton has an incredible dark, twisted imagination. And Alice in Wonderland is one of the best examples that shows us that.
Also, I think the residents are very memorable and nostalgic, though I still wonder why some of them were given names. For example, the White Rabbit is named Nivens McTwist, the Dormouse is named Maliunkin, and the Caterpillar is named Absalom.
I agree. The characters are very memorable. I mean, who doesn't love the Mad Hatter? He was always one of my favorites in the original film. In this case, they kind of give him a lot more than just being full-blown mega crazy, which I think is really awesome. And the Cheshire Cat, even though he does creep me out, they give a lot more to his character, which I really like a lot.
I definitely agree with you, movie fan. And come to think of it, the Mad Hatter is interesting in this film because what I find it interesting is that we get an origin story of why and how he became like this.
Plus, I do have to give this film credit for including characters that were either never included or scrapped from Disney's 1951 animated film. Most notably, the Jabberwocky, which became one of my top 13 scariest monsters in a live-action film.
To be honest, I thought that was pretty impressive that Tim Burton added in all these characters that were never used originally in the classic film. Like, for instance, the White Queen's army is primarily chess pieces, or at least they're made to look like chess pieces anyway. As I recall, there was one part in the story where Alice actually comes into an area where, well, they're all chess pieces. Not too many versions have ever brought that up, and I'm glad that they did that for this one. And as for the Jabberwocky, well, he was great. I definitely love his image, and there's no denying that Christopher Lee, he was a great voice for him. Sadly, it's very brief, but he still did great.
You know, I'm impressed that this film included characters that was not in the animated film. Most notably, the White Queen and her chess army, and the Jabberwocky. Also, the cast are really good in their roles. Mia Wasikowska, Johnny Depp, Helena Bonham Carter, Kristen Glover, Anne Hathaway, Alan Rickman, and others, including Michael Gough as the Dodo, which is his final role before he passed away in 2011.
But, in my eyes, the best character overall is Terrence Hightop, aka the Mad Hatter, who pretty much steals the entire show with his madness, his dancing, and his mood swings. Plus, nowadays, he kind of reminds me of my role as Dr. Dodo in Musical Theater Village's production of Alice One Cat's Tale, due to him leading a rebellion. Also to note, I find it kind of shocking that Tim Burton despises cats, considering that my second favorite character in this movie would have to be the Cheshire Cat. And I really love the part where he saves Hatter during the execution scene, which makes me want to call him the Cheshire Cat in the Hat.
A bit on the nose, isn't it, Joshua?
Funny name, Joshua. The Cheshire Cat in the Hat. What I find interesting is that in this film, the Cheshire Cat doesn't just floats and flies around and disappears like he usually does, but he's also a shapeshifter, as you can see here. Even that is just a brief moment, but it is very interesting. When it was released in 2010, the film generated $1.25 billion in ticket sales and became the 5th highest grossing film during its theatrical run. And it is also the 2nd highest grossing film of 2010. Not only that, it won 2 Academy Awards. One for Best Art Direction, given to production designer Robert Stromberg and set decorator Karen O'Hara, and the other for Best Costume Design, given to Colleen Atwood.
Plus, we must mention that 6 years later, the film gained a sequel called Alice Through the Looking Glass, which is not as good, but it does bring back a lot of fond memories. It shows a few levels of darkness and twists in a few places, and it makes a very thrilling sea voyage through time.
Sadly, I've never seen this one, so I can't really comment.
I haven't seen the sequel, but I did hear about how bad it is. However, I'll check it out when I get the time. In the meantime, if you haven't seen this film, I recommend it.
Anyway, with all that said, Tim Burton's Alice in Wonderland truly is one of the maddest movies ever. Now for this spot, we're going to look at a movie that came all the way from Mars. Now, this film involves a fleet of Martian spacecraft who surrounds the world's major cities, and all of humanity waits to see if the extraterrestrial visitors have, as they claim, come in peace. United States President James Dale is convinced by Professor Donald Kessler that the Martians would be a developed culture and therefore peaceful by nature. The authorities and the press prepare a welcoming committee for the aliens, but they soon realize that Mars is actually attacking Earth. Now, I'm not really sure if you viewers know that this cheesy mid-90s alien invader flick is actually based on a trading card series released in 1962 by Topps. Well, I sure as heck didn't know that until 2012. And since I hope to blog this movie someday, I won't give away too much. However, I'd like Movie Fan and Jonathan to give their opinions about this first before I do. Guys, if you will.
Well, I'll be honest, I was kind of a latecomer to seeing Mars Attacks, because when I saw it, it was almost 2000 when I first seen it. And it actually blew my mind because, I heard about this movie, but I was never given the opportunity to see it because my folks wouldn't let me. But when they showed it on TV, I was glued to it because I really did love the special effects that was involved here. Everything about it is classic Tim Burton, because he loves to use practical effects, as we all know. But he's also not afraid to experiment, because as we all see with the Martians, they are clearly CGI. Now granted, it is dated now, but for that time, this is pretty impressive. And it's weird that I'm saying this, that while watching this movie, I found it both terrifying and downright hilarious at the same time, because, well, obviously, Martians are attacking Earth, they're destroying people, but at the same time, so many things happen. They're just downright hilarious. Like, well, the way they talk, and some of the shenanigans they do, like when they're getting ready to destroy the Taj Mahal, they take a group photo of it. And of course, they make Mount Rushmore look like them. And one of my personal favorites is when they're in Vegas and apparently they like Tom Jones's music, because when they appeared, they're dancing before everybody realizes, uh-oh, the Martians are here. Only Tim Burton could come up with something like this. Now, funny thing, because of the level of violence that's actually used in this one, this is probably Tim Burton's most violent picture.
I'm not too familiar with the trading cards, and also, I didn't know that this movie is based on this series as well, thanks to two of my favorite YouTubers, Huey Toonmore and Sean Pulse. As for my thoughts on the film, well, in my opinion, I find this to be a fun movie, and I enjoy it.
Now, from my perspective, the reason why I put Mars Attacks so low on the list is because, as I said earlier, it can be pretty cheesy at times. Plus, a few characters aren't really that memorable to me, with a few exceptions. And the worldwide destruction and kills can be a bit over the top. But, on the positive side, I thought it was pretty cool that Tim Burton believed that Mars Attacks would be the perfect opportunity to pay homage to the films of Edward D. Wood Jr., especially Planet 9 from Outer Space and other 1950s sci-fi films such as Invaders from Mars, It Came from Outer Space, War of the Worlds, Target Earth, Invasion of the Body Snatchers, and Earth vs. the Flying Saucers. What do you guys think?
Frankly, I think it's awesome that Tim Burton used this to pay homage to those classic movies. Heck, not too many directors do such a thing. Most of the time, they just do whatever they feel like doing, and they don't take the time to pay homage to the guys who paved the way for them. And speaking of which, I think there's also another film that might have been part of the inspiration for Mars Attacks. And that would be Godzilla vs. Monster Zero, or Invasion of the Astro Monster, as it's known in Japan. Because there's a part in this movie where the aliens have one weakness, and it involves a real certain sound. And that's what happened here in Mars Attacks.
To let you know, movie fan, is that years after this movie, there are a few directors that made movies that pay homages to classic movies, such as Michael Dougherty with Krampus that pay homages to some classic movies from the 80s, as you can see here, and Ari Aster with Midsummer that pay homages to The Wicker Man. And on the topic of Edward D. Wood Jr., you must know that this movie came after Tim Burton's previous film, Ed Wood, which came out in 1994. Also to let you know that if you watch closely, there's a part where the Martians were watching a Godzilla movie.
Also, I feel like Industrial Light and Magic did a pretty good job with bringing the Martians to life using computer animation. And I find it interesting that the movie was shot in California, Nevada, Kansas, Arizona, and Argentina. Also, I thought the way the Martians were defeated, thanks to Slim Whitman's yodeling on Indian Love Call, was something that I never actually saw coming at first. What do you guys think?
No, I didn't originally, but with Tim Burton, you gotta expect the unexpected, that's for sure. And like I said, it's because of that certain yodeling sound that I think part of the inspiration for that had to have come from Godzilla vs. Monster Zero.
Here's an interesting fact for you. Originally, the Martians were supposed to be in stop motion, but due to budget limitations, the filmmakers hired Industrial Light and Magic to create the Martians in CGI. Also to let you know that Mars Attacks was originally going to be released in the summer of 1996, but Warner Brothers decided to release it in December because another alien invasion film from 20th Century Fox, Independence Day, was released at that time. But just like Ed Wood, Mars Attacks failed in the box office, both commercially and critically, because many observers found similarities to Independence Day, which also came out the same year. Nowadays, the film of Mars Attacks goes from a box office bomb to an underrated film. But for me, I enjoy it, and Tim Burton did a good job in making the film. So if you haven't seen Mars Attacks, I recommend you to check it out.
Well said, guys. Well said. Mars Attacks, an alien flick that's truly out of this world.
We all make mistakes, Mr. President.
Not anymore. We're going to take charge of this thing.
Well, folks, we're back on Earth, and for this spot, we're going to visit a very peculiar home. Based on the 2011 novel by Ransom Riggs, this film follows a young man named Jake Portman who sets out on a journey to find the mysterious Miss Peregrine's home for peculiar children, a haven for all those born with unusual and extraordinary abilities. Persecuted through the ages, the Peculiars live protected from the outside world under their head mistress's wing inside an enchanted and well-hidden orphanage that seems to defy the laws of time, perpetually looping the same day every day. But then, the mystery and danger deepens as Jake gets to know the residents and learns about their special powers along with their terrifying enemies known as the Hollows, and he discovers that his very own special peculiarity can help save his new friends. Now, I still stand by, ever since 2016, that this film is great. It's dark, epic, and thought-provoking, and part of it still makes me think of Foster's Home for Imaginary Friends. And it's cool that it features time travel. What do you think, guys?
I agree fully. This is a very interesting film because, it's one thing to talk about people with superpowers, but in the case of these particular people, they have not really so much superpowers, but very unusual powers. And I do like how they take that approach because superpowers, they're overused way too much. And let's get real, if such a thing really existed of people with superpowers, back in the day, they would not have been really loved like you see in the Superman movies. They would have been shunned. They would have been hated because they were so different. And that's the truth. I love how this movie brings that out.
When I first saw this movie in theaters, I thought it was okay. But after rewatching it on Disney+, well, in my opinion, I find this to be a really good movie, and I enjoy it. I also find it interesting that these kids have unique abilities just like in the books, such as the twins have the same abilities as Medusa, where one stare at the eyes can turn people into stone, Millard, who's known as the Invisible Boy, and Olive, who can spread fire or heat up things with a touch of her hands.
Also, from my perspective, I think the main character, Jake, seems like a very brave kid, and I like that he's tasked with protecting the Peculiars. Miss Peregrine, despite being strict, is a clever, caring, and protective woman. I think her home is a pretty interesting place, and I think the Peculiar children have really neat abilities, and I find it sweet that Jake gets a love interest in the form of Emma Bloom.
I actually like that too, because you know what? Those two, they really do feel like they belong together. They really do. And that's not an easy thing to think about when you're talking about a movie like this, where, things are so, peculiar. But once again, I think it's great because they really do look like they belong together.
I agree. Jake and Emma are really made for each other. And in my opinion, Asa Butterfield and Ella Purnell made really good performances. So do the rest of the cast, such as Eva Green, Terrence Stamp, Judi Dench, Samuel L. Jackson, and many others.
Plus, I thought the part where the Germans bombed the Peculiar Children's house was very tragic and depressing, and I think the Hollows have got to be some of the most scariest monsters that I've ever seen on the big screen, mostly due to them being invisible to ordinary people, which makes them pretty similar to the Dementors from Harry Potter.
Well, I wouldn't really know because I never did see the Harry Potter films. I saw the first one and I hated it, so I'll have to take your word for it. But I will say that these creatures are creepy.
In my opinion, these monsters may be kind of similar to the Dementors from the Harry Potter films, but also they're kind of like something out of the Netflix series of Stranger Things, which came out the same year as this movie. Very interesting, isn't it? Not only that, but the look of it kind of reminds me of one of the legendary monsters, the Slender Man from the series of Marble Hornets.
And I think their leader, Mr. Baron, is flippin' creepy, with his blank white eyes, menacing smile, and crazy hair. Plus, I think it's really messed up that he and his followers feed on the Peculiar Children's eyes in order to recover their human form. And it's scary that he can turn his hands into any weapon he wants. Now, where have I seen that before? Oh, right, Judge Doom.
So with all that said, if you enjoyed the book series, then you'll have a great time with this movie. And I hope that someday we'll get a follow-up.
Anyway, for a film that features peculiar children and time travel, this is a Tim Burton film that you really must check out. And now we're coming to the very movie that is the most obvious reason why I decided to make this list. But before we talk about the movie itself, let's all say his name 3 times.
Beetlejuice, Beetlejuice, Beetlejuice.
In my eyes, this film is a classic horror comedy, and it's one of the rare original Tim Burton films on this list. Plus, I just can't believe that I was introduced to the title character way back in 1995 from a rock and roll stage show at Universal Studios Hollywood. Guys, how were you introduced to Beetlejuice, and what was your experience like?
Well, believe it or not, I was introduced to Beetlejuice through the animated series because it was on when I was growing up. Unfortunately, my folks wouldn't let me watch it. However, there were a few times I managed to watch it while they weren't looking. But I remember the series, I remember it well, it was great. At that time, I had no idea the movie existed until decades later. Then when I finally watched it, that was absolutely incredible. I just loved every minute of it.
As for me, I was introduced to Beetlejuice by watching the film of it back in my days in middle school, and I had a good time watching it for the first time. And after rewatching it many times, I enjoy the movie of Beetlejuice, and I have a lot of fun watching it.
Anyway, despite the fact that he doesn't have too much screen time, I think Beetlejuice is such a riot. And wouldn't surprise me if he was an inspiration for Discord from My Little Pony, due to his crazy, mischievous antics. And I think the main characters, the Maitlands, seem pretty relatable and sympathetic. Also, I think Lydia has got to be the most interesting character in the entire movie.
I do agree, Lydia is an interesting character, but I gotta give it up for the ghost with the most, Beetlejuice himself. Because Michael Keaton, he was so perfect for the role. He brought that character to life. Now, granted, like you said, Joshua, he isn't given much screen time, which is kind of ironic considering that it bears his name. But still, When he is there, for what little time he's given, he makes the most of it. He really brings that character to life. He really stole the show. And I can't think of a person who doesn't love Beetlejuice himself.
I agree, movie fan, and here's an interesting fact for you. At first, Tim was about to hire Sammy Davis Jr. to play the title role of Beetlejuice. But instead, he hired comedy actor Michael Keaton to play the role. In my opinion, he did an excellent job playing this character. And I also agree with you that he stole the show. Other performances including Winona Ryder, Alec Baldwin, Gina Davis, Catherine O'Hara, Jeffrey Jones, Glenn Shadak, and others. And I gotta say, they did excellent in their roles.
Plus, I also like the several special effects, ranging from stop motion, replacement animation, prosthetic makeup, puppetry, and blue screen.
I love the special effects as well, such as stop motion, puppetry, blue screen, and miniature models. I also love the sets, the costumes, and the music by composer Danny Elfman, including the songs by the late great Harry Belafonte, who passed away last year.
Also to note, this film won an Academy Award for Best Makeup, and it won a trio of Saturn Awards for Best Horror Film, Best Makeup, and Best Supporting Actress for Sylvia Sidney. Movie fan, Jonathan, what do you guys think?
I think those awards were rightfully earned. Although I'm a little surprised that Michael Keaton didn't get an Oscar for his performance.
I say that this movie deserves an Oscar and 3 Saturn Awards because this is a very fantastic movie. And let's face it, it was successful when it was released. Because of the movie's success, not only that it got an animated series which lasted for 4 seasons from 1989 to 1991, it also got a Broadway stage musical, and recently it got a sequel.
Also to note, during the making of this video, I've been watching the Beetlejuice animated series on DVD, and in my opinion, this show is criminally underrated, with all sorts of crazy and macabre adventures between Beetlejuice and Lydia, and I think we should all thank the talented animators from Nelvana for making this show possible. Lastly to mention, after rewatching this movie, it makes me really thrilled and excited to see the new sequel. So, if you guys get the chance, be sure to go see it. I can assure you that you'll be in for quite a blast.
I know I've been itching to go see it ever since I heard about the sequel coming out. And I have to disagree a little bit, Joshua, about what you said about the series being criminally underrated. Because back in the day, this series was very well loved. Granted, the series only lasted for 4 years, but it left a huge impression on everybody. If anything, I would say it's been criminally forgotten, because when the series went off the air, they never talked about it, until finally the DVDs started coming out. In fact, just last year, at one of the cons I went to, there was a girl who dressed up as Lydia from the animated series of Beetlejuice, and by the way, she won the cosplay contest.
At first, I'm not sure if this movie should have a sequel after films like Disney's Disenchanted and Aardman's Chicken Run, Dawn of the Nugget. But like with Hocus Pocus 2, judging by the trailers, I'm looking forward to see how it goes. And I hope it will be as fun as the first movie. In the meantime, if you haven't seen the movie of Beetlejuice, we highly recommend you to check out this movie. Trust us, it will blow you away.
Beetlejuice. Say his name 3 times, and all chaos will ensue.
So, say it once, say it twice, 3rd time the charm, and remember, I'll eat anything you want me to eat. I'll swallow anything you want me to swallow. Come on down now. Chew on a dog.
Now, I hope you viewers have your remote controls, because our next spot can be found in 1970s Collinsport. Now, as I stated recently, I was a bit skeptical at first, but after seeing it in 2012, Dark Shadows really surprised me. Plus, I learned back then that my late grandmother Joanne Preschel loved the original TV series by Dan Curtis, and I really hope to give it a watch for her sake. Hey guys, do you have any experience with the original TV show?
Believe it or not, this is one I have not seen yet. For some reason, it has not come up on any of the channels that I watch old TV shows on. So, sorry, can't give you any help on that one.
I haven't seen the TV show either, but because of this movie, I will check it out when I get the chance. Also, to let you know that I just found out that there are other Dark Shadows in media, such as House of Dark Shadows in 1970, a TV series reboot in 1991 which lasted for one season with only 12 episodes, and a TV movie of Dark Shadows in 2005. As for my thoughts on the film, well, in my opinion, I like the movie of Dark Shadows, and I say that it is a fun movie to watch.
Anyway, from my perspective, while watching Dark Shadows, I think the story is very thought-provoking and pretty tragic, due to it being about a young man who's cursed to be a vampire by an evil witch and is locked in a coffin for nearly 200 years. And after reawakening in the year 1972, Barnabas hopes to help his descendants get their seafood business restored. Speaking of which, I think the Collins family are pretty similar to the Addams family due to their manor, Collinwood, being gothic and on a hill, and some of the family members like Elizabeth, Dr. Hoffman, Carolyn, David, Roger, even Vicky have some dark secrets.
Well, you know the old saying about having skeletons in the closet. I guess every family has their dark secrets, and I found them to be kind of interesting, but not nearly as interesting as Barnabas. Because, well, you know, I can't help but feel sorry for him because, well, he was cursed, and it's obvious he really doesn't like being a vampire. He's just stuck with it.
You know, movie fan, I also feel bad for Barnabas Collins as well, because not only that he's been cursed as a vampire, but he also lost his parents and his love Josette all because of the witch Angie, who killed them all before she cursed him into a vampire.
Plus, despite committing murder a couple times, I think Barnabas is a kind gentleman, and I like his curiosity regarding the time period that he currently lives in. Also, I think Tim Burton did a really great job at bringing the 1970s to life with this movie. And I like that it includes classic rock and roll songs along with a cameo from Alice Cooper.
Okay, first off, that's awesome they got Alice Cooper in on this, because he's a legend, and rightfully so. At the same time, with the cinematography here, I'm not surprised that it was this good, because Tim Burton, he does a great job when it comes to cinematography. Whenever he wants a scene to really look like something, he does it. If he wants it to look like the 70s, he's going to make it look like the 70s. If he wants it to look really weird, well, he's going to do that too.
I couldn't agree more, movie fan. Not only that I like the cinematography, but I also love the special effects, the sets, the costumes, and makeup. I gotta say that Tim Burton did a great job directing this film. Of course, to let you know that while Danny Elfman composed the music for this film, it's also awesome that this film included songs that were performed by artists from the late 60s to the early 70s, such as the Moody Blues, the Carpenters, Barry White, and a few others. Also, I gotta say that this is surprisingly awesome that we got Alice Cooper himself to be in a cameo. And if that wasn't enough, we also have some of the original cast from the Dark Shadows TV series making a cameo appearance as well. The cast are also really good too. Johnny Depp, Eva Green, Helena Bonham Carter, Chloe Grace Moretz, Jackie Earle Haley, Michelle Pfeiffer, Christopher Lee, and others.
Also, I think the villain, Angie, is a mad, jealous, seductive, and sick witch for constantly flirting with Barnabas and blackmailing him at times. And I thought it was very twisted when it was revealed that she was the one who murdered David's mother and sent a werewolf to bite Carolyn. Guys, what do you think?
I think with this one, twisted is putting it a little mildly, but again, I wouldn't expect any less from Tim Burton, because it's what he does. He does the weird, and he certainly does twisted as well.
I definitely agree. And in my opinion, I say that the witch Angie is one of the best villains I've ever come across. Especially moments where she's seductive, sneaky, and insane. Including moments where she blackmails Barnabas Collins. Also to let you know that I was surprised about the reveal of what she did later to the Collins relatives during the climax. So if you enjoy the TV show of Dark Shadows, then you'll probably enjoy this movie.
So, with all that said, Dark Shadows is a film packed with twisted secrets.
That was a regrettable turn of events.
Are you stoned or something?
They tried stoning me, my dear. It did not work.
And now, for the number 8 spot, we're gonna go downstairs to attend a wedding between the living and the dead.
This is gonna be good.
Hit it, boys.
Now, Corpse Bride is Tim Burton's second stop-motion animated film. Well, third if you count Vincent, but whatever. Anyway, taking place in 19th century England, this film centers on the Everglot and the Van Dort families who arrange a wedding for their children, Victor and Victoria. Though they do like each other, Victor is very nervous about the ceremony. While he's in the forest practicing his vows for the wedding, a tree branch becomes a hand that drags him into the land of the dead. It belongs to Emily, who was murdered after eloping with her love and wants to marry Victor. And now, Victor must somehow get back above ground before his fiancée Victoria marries the villainous Lord Barkus Bittern. Now, in my eyes, this is one of the best animated films of 2005, up there with Blue Sky's Robots, Aardman's Wallace and Gromit, The Curse of the Were-Rabbit, and of course, Hayao Miyazaki's Howl's Moving Castle. And I really want to thank my good friend Christopher Haskins, whom I've sadly lost touch with after leaving high school, for taking me to see it in theaters for my belated 15th birthday. To me, the stop-motion animation is really amazing, and I really love how Tim Burton designed the Land of the Dead. And I find it pretty interesting how a majority of the residents down there are skeletons.
I totally agree. The stop motion used in this movie is absolutely incredible. Tim Burton is one of the few that has really mastered this. There are others, but this is the guy who really helped bring it back. And he's definitely mastered it to a great level.
Now, I have to tell you that not only that Corpse Bride is one of the best films that Tim Burton did, but also this is one of the absolute best anime movies ever made. And in my opinion, it's one of the best movies that is worth watching in every October. And I definitely agree with you. The animation in this film is incredible, especially the Land of the Dead, due to how colorful it is.
Also, the story, being a horror romance, can sometimes be a bit serious, emotional, thought-provoking, and tragic at times. And the songs by Danny Elfman and John August are pretty good. My favorite being The Remains of the Day.
I like this song too. It's very catchy. I love how it's like a big jazz song. And I get the feeling that Danny Elfman was getting back in touch with his earlier times. Because you might remember, he was part of the band Oingo Boingo, and they did the legendary song Dead Man's Party. I think he was just going back to his roots there. And I'll tell you, it worked out great.
I also love the story. It is very well told. Interesting to let you know that this film is based on a Jewish folklore called The Finger, where a young man is out in the woods celebrating his upcoming marriage with his friends when they come upon a corpse. And I didn't know that until recently. Fascinating, isn't it? I love the music by Danny Elfman as well. It's amazing to listen to. Also, I love the songs that he and John August wrote for this film. The song of Remains of the Day is my favorite in the film. And I also enjoy other songs, such as According to Plan, Tears to Shed, and the wedding song. Also, to let you know that while doing the music and songs for this film, he did the speaking and singing voice of the one-eyed skeleton Bone Jangles. And I say that he did a fantastic job.
Plus, the main character Victor is very relatable due to him being nervous and terrified of being married to someone whom he's never met. Plus, am I the only one who thinks he almost looks like Prince Vince from Beetlejuice the Animated Series?
Maybe. I'll admit there's a pretty strong resemblance here.
You know, Victor kinda looks like Prince Vince from Beetlejuice the Animated Series, but also to let you know that Prince Vince looks kinda resemblance to Vincent from Tim Burton's short film Vincent. I also agree that Victor is a relatable character because of how nervous he is in the beginning of the film. And I gotta tell you that Johnny Depp made a really good performance in this film. So do the rest of the voice cast, such as Helena Bonham Carter, Emily Watson, Tracy Ullman, Paul Whitehouse, Joanna Lumley, Albert Finney, Richard E. Grant, Christopher Lee, Michael Gough, and a few others. In my opinion, the cast did a really good job voicing the characters, and I enjoy it.
Anyway, moving on, the corpse bride Emily is also sympathetic due to her tragic backstory. Victor's fiancée, Victoria, is a sweet character, and I feel bad that she's mistreated by her parents. And the villain, Lord Barkis, is a very devious character, due to him being a charming, yet murderous con artist. Plus, I thought it was really shocking when it was revealed that he was Emily's former fiancé and killer.
That was surprising. Fortunately, he does end up paying for it in the end.
I definitely agree with you. Also to let you know that Corpse Bride is Tim Burton's first film to be nominated for an Oscar for Best Animated Feature, but lost to Wallace and Gromit: The Curse of the Were-Rabbit, which is also one of my favorites. Even that it didn't win, still, it was a great honor that it was nominated. Also to let you know that Corpse Bride is one of the 2 Tim Burton animated films that I hope that someday will be turned into a Broadway stage musical.
There are also a few other memorable characters in this movie, like the wise and caring Elder Gutnicht, the cranky Pastor Galswells, the hilarious Town Crier, along with the sidekicks Mayhew, Scraps, the Black Widow Spider, and the Maggot.
Interesting fact, the Maggot is based off of legendary actor Peter Lorre, because the Maggot tries to copy his demeanor and his speech of tone. But again, Peter Lorre was so legendary for his horror films, so it's no surprise. And Tim Burton's always been good at doing a tip of the cap to all the great legends of horror films.
Here's also something very interesting for you. During the scene where Victor played the piano, and if you look carefully of the plaque of the piano, it says Harryhausen, which pays an homage to the late legendary stop-motion master, Ray Harryhausen. And if that wasn't enough, that skeleton with sunglasses who played the piano, that was also an homage to the late legendary piano player and singer Ray Charles, who passed away in 2004. Very interesting, isn't it? So with all that said, if you haven't seen Corpse Bride, check this movie out. Believe us, you are gonna love it.
With all that said, Tim Burton's Corpse Bride is a stop-motion film that goes according to plan.
Why standing? Look, Ricky, so sorry. What's it? Oh.
Next on our list is a very interesting but dark mystery film. And this one deals with a legendary American ghost story. Ooh yeah, now we're in for the really good stuff. In this film, Constable Ichabod Crane is sent to Sleepy Hollow to investigate a series of murders. Approached by the town council, Crane discovers that the murders are the work of a deadly Hessian known as the Headless Horseman, whose head has been mysteriously chopped off. With the help of a young sidekick and the beautiful Katrina Van Tassel, Crane's investigation takes him further through the dark woods where more murders have been occurring. Now, as I previously stated a while ago, I was first introduced to the Legend of Sleepy Hollow years ago when my mom read a ghostly bedtime story to me and my sister when we were kids. And then, sometime after that, I saw a school play which reenacted the legendary tale on stage. Plus, I have seen a few other film adaptations of the story several years later, like The Haunted Pumpkin of Sleepy Hollow and The Adventures of Ichabod and Mr. Toad. Movie fan, Jonathan, how were you introduced to the Sleepy Hollow story?
I was introduced to it by the Disney version.
I was introduced to the story of Sleepy Hollow by watching the Tim Burton film. And of course, later I did watch the Disney version, and then later, The Legend of Sleepy Hollow from Rabbit Ears Entertainment, which was narrated by Glenn Close. I must let you know that in my opinion, this is one of the most pretty good movies I've ever seen, and this is one of the best films that Tim Burton have ever done.
Anyway, back to Tim Burton's version. During the 2000s, I have known about the movie, only problem was, due to its R rating, I was both not allowed to watch it, and I was afraid to at the time. But then, during Halloween of 2011, when Huey Toonmore mentioned it on his top 13 scariest animated monsters, it gave me the courage to step out of my comfort zone and give it a shot. And lo and behold, after watching it for my first time, it really surprised me, due to it mostly being a mystery film. So Huey, if you're watching this, I just want to say thank you for the encouragement. Plus, I find it interesting that Tim Burton took some inspiration from Disney's version, and I like how Sleepy Hollow, New York looks in this version. Heck, even the woods are really creepy when it's either nighttime or when it's foggy.
Once again, Tim Burton is showing how great he is with cinematography, because to get that kind of look, it's not easy. And what's really surprising is that most of it was actually shot on location. Not at Sleepy Hollow, New York, but in a little town in England called Leavesden.
I also love the cinematography as well, so do the sets and locations. It is very well detailed and very creepy. I also love the costumes and makeup.
By the way, believe it or not, I actually passed by the real Sleepy Hollow during the Easter weekend of 2005 with my mom and sister, and this may be a bit off subject, but I just can't believe that there's a Sleepy Hollow in Laguna Beach in my home state of California.
That is surprising, actually.
It is very interesting, Joshua. And speaking of interesting, I must let you know that according to YouTuber Sean Paulds, he said that this movie was inspired by the Hammer films. As we all know that it's based on the book of The Legend of Sleepy Hollow by Washington Irving. You must know that there are a few differences from the movie in comparison to the book. For instance, Ichabod Crane is from New York, and he's a detective, instead of being from Connecticut, having a job as a school teacher in Sleepy Hollow. Come to think of it, this movie is like watching an American version of Sherlock Holmes coming to Sleepy Hollow to solve the case of the Headless Horseman.
As for the characters, well, I think Ichabod Crane is another memorable Tim Burton character, and I find it interesting that he's a constable instead of a school teacher. Plus, I kinda like that he survives in this version, unlike most adaptations. His sidekick, young Mazbeth, seems like a pretty bright young man, and his love interest, Katrina Van Tassel, is sweet, adventurous, and I find it pretty neat and thought-provoking that she possesses an inexplicable knowledge of spells.
I couldn't agree more. The characters are very interesting. In fact, they're kind of a one-up from all the other versions I've ever seen because they add so much to the story, every one of them. And what I find really interesting about this is not just the characters, but the way it plays out. Because it feels like a mixture of the classic tale of Sleepy Hollow, but at the same time, it's also got a touch of the Salem witch trials, because there's witchcraft all over the place here. So Tim Burton clearly got some inspiration from that, and he put it together in a real spectacular way.
You know, it is very interesting that in this film, not only that we're dealing with the case of the Headless Horseman, but we're also dealing with witchcraft. Also to let you know that Tim Burton hired an amazing cast. Johnny Depp, Christina Ricci, Jeffrey Jones, Martin Landau, Christopher Lee, Michael Gough, Lisa Marie, Richard Griffiths, Michael Gambon, Miranda Richardson, and Christopher Walken as the horseman with his head.
But the true highlight in this movie would have to be the Headless Horseman. For those who don't know, the Horseman was a Hessian soldier that lost his head to a cannonball during the American Revolution. And ever since, his ghost has been haunting the woods of Sleepy Hollow in search of a new head to replace the one he had lost. However, in this version, he's a mercenary sent by German princes to help keep America under the British rule. And he was killed after being ambushed by revolutionary soldiers who cut his head off with his own sword. In my eyes, I think this version of the Headless Horseman is a lot scarier than Disney's take, due to how violent and ferocious he is, especially during this scene.
There is no doubt he is just that, violent and ferocious, and that's what makes him even more scary.
He sure does. Without a doubt, the Headless Horseman is one of the best monsters in a Tim Burton film. Not to mention, one of the scariest.
Plus, I think Ray Park and Christopher Walken both do great performances as this infamous spirit.
There's not much more I could add to that except that I totally agree. Those two were great as the Headless Horseman.
I definitely agree. And to let you know that at that time, Ray Park, who did the stunts for the Headless Horseman, also played the role of Darth Maul in Star Wars Episode 1, The Phantom Menace, which was also released in 1999. And on the topic of that, Ian McDiarmid, who's in this film, was also in Star Wars Episode 1, The Phantom Menace, as both Palpatine and his alter ego, Darth Sidious. Fascinating, isn't it?
And I think the Tree of the Dead, where his body is buried, is obviously something that Tim Burton would design. And it looks really reminiscent to the Curly Hill in The Nightmare Before Christmas.
Believe it or not, that thought occurred to me as well.
I like the design of the Tree of the Dead, and also, if you look carefully at the top part of the tree, it kind of looks like a head of a whale.
But the surprising thing about him is he's not even the main villain. He's actually a weapon controlled through the use of his skull and black magic by Lady Van Tassel.
Once again, Tim Burton shows how brilliant of a director he is, because that was an absolutely brilliant concept. And like I said before, he literally took a classic story, mixed in witchcraft, and he made it work in such a spectacular way.
I gotta say that this is one of the most interesting plot twists I've ever seen, especially that she's the one who's behind these murders. I also like the name, The Archer. The special effects in this film are also really good, with the use of practical effects and CGI, especially that it was done by creature effects supervisor Kevin Yeager and the creative team of Industrial Light and Magic. I also love the music by Danny Elfman, which, like Batman Returns, it is hauntingly beautiful. When the film was released in 1999, it became a critical and commercial success, and it won an Oscar for Best Art Direction, given to art director Rick Hendricks and set decorator Peter Young, and it totally deserved it. So yeah, I must say that this is a very good movie, and if you haven't seen this film of Sleepy Hollow, check it out, and it's one of the best films to watch in October, especially on Halloween.
So, if you want to see a film that takes a classic American ghost story and turns it into a thrilling mystery film, be sure to give this movie a watch. Sleepy Hollow. Watch your head! Now, while Tim Burton has adapted books, TV shows, comic books, old movies, trading cards, and real people, I don't know if a lot of people remember that he also adapted a stage musical. Based on the stage musical by Stephen Sondheim and Hugh Wheeler, along with the 1970 stage play Sweeney Todd by Christopher Bond, this film tells the melodramatic Victorian tale of Sweeney Todd, originally known as Benjamin Barker, who returns to London after 15 years of being wrongfully convicted and exiled by the corrupt Judge Turpin. And now, Todd vows revenge. Upon arriving on Fleet Street, he meets the widow and meat pie shop owner, Mrs. Lovett, who tells him that his wife Lucy swallowed arsenic many years ago, and Turpin has taken his daughter Joanna as his ward. Todd then reopens his barber shop and initiates a murder rampage by applying his razor to unlucky male customers while waiting for his chance to get back at Judge Turpin. Now, like Phantom of the Opera and a few other shows out there, I've never seen this on stage yet, nor have I ever performed in it. But I have managed to see a few scenes of it on YouTube, and I heard that Sweeney Todd was the inspiration for Freaky Fred from Courage the Cowardly Dog.
Well, with all honesty, that wouldn't surprise me, because Freaky Fred, he was creepy. He was probably one of the most creepiest characters on there. And he was a barber, just like Sweeney Todd, so it wouldn't surprise me.
It does surprise me as well that Freaky Fred was inspired by Sweeney Todd. Also to let you know, Joshua, that I haven't seen the Broadway stage musical of Sweeney Todd as well. And as for my thoughts on the film, I like the movie, and it makes me feel like I want to check out the Broadway stage musical.
Anyway, from my perspective, this has got to be the most serious, darkest, and bloodiest Tim Burton film on this list. Why? Because it explores murder, betrayal, and lust. And you would not believe how I felt after watching this movie on DVD with my family back in the mid to late 2000s. I mean, it really made me cringe in fear, it made me chill up my spine, and the blood really made me ugh. Plus, like with Sleepy Hollow, this was the decade where I was not used to R-rated media at the time.
Unfortunately, my experience wasn't very good, I hate to tell you guys. Well, my sister, she just loves Tim Burton's work, and she loves Johnny Depp. So she had to get this movie immediately. And she tried to get me to watch it for years. And finally, I just folded and I watched it, and I'm sorry, I didn't think much of it. It wasn't the horror that got me, because I'm used to that. It's just that I don't see what everybody sees in this. I'm sorry, I really don't. I respect the work put into it, because with Tim Burton, he really does a great job. But I'm sorry, it just wasn't a very good experience to me.
From my experience, this movie is horrifying, especially that has to do with things like murder, horror, and lust.
Anyway, nowadays, even though I am autistic, I pretty much understand the story a lot better. And I find it interesting that Tim Burton was fascinated with the original 1970 stage show in London when he was a Cal Arts student. I mean, he was struck by how cinematic it was, and he saw it as a silent film with music.
Well, Tim Burton does love the macabre, and either way, he is a patron of the arts, so I'm not too surprised about that.
After watching it a few times, I say that the story is very good, and I also understand it as well. And I'm surprised that Tim Burton saw the stage musical of Sweeney Todd. So no wonder why he made it stay true to the source material of the Broadway musical. Also, I love the sets, the costumes and makeup, the special effects, and the music. Also, the cast are really good in their roles. Not only that Johnny Depp and Helena Bonham Carter did a really great job for their performances, but also Alan Rickman, Timothy Spall, Sacha Baron Cohen, and a few others. These guys did a very good job playing those roles, acting-wise and singing-wise. Interesting enough, Helena Bonham Carter, Alan Rickman, and Timothy Spall, who were in this movie, were also at that time played Professor Severus Snape, Bellatrix Lestrange, and Peter Pettigrew in the Harry Potter movie franchise. Crazy, isn't it?
Plus, I really like the setting in 1846 London, which was mostly dark and dirty, and it really brings back thrilling memories of when I went there with my family back in summer 2010. Fleet Street was one of several landmarks that I saw while I was there, by the way. Also, while I'm not the biggest fan of Stephen Sondheim's songs, due to them sometimes being pretty serious and difficult to understand, I think the songs for this movie musical can range from calm, tragic, intense, emotional, and thought-provoking. Also, it should be worth noting that it is very sad that Stephen Sondheim is no longer with us as of 2021.
That truly was a great loss, because I am familiar with Stephen Sondheim. He was great with his music. So, it's a crying shame that he's gone.
You're not the only one, Joshua. When I saw the movie and listened to the songs of it, there are moments when some of the lyrics goes fast, but aside from that nitpick, I still enjoy the songs in this film, along with the songs that he did for the film Dick Tracy from 1990. And yes, it really is a shame that we lost one of the Broadway legends.
Now, what else is there to say? Oh yes, since its release, this film has been widely assessed as one of the greatest musical films of the 21st century. Plus, it won an Academy Award Best Art Direction for Dante Ferretti and Francesco Lo Schiavo. It won a Golden Globe Award Best Motion Picture, Musical, or Comedy. Plus, Johnny Depp, who played Sweeney Todd, won a Golden Globe for Best Actor, Motion Picture, Musical, or Comedy, as well as an MTV Movie Award for Best Villain. Very impressive, don't you think?
Very much so. And with Johnny Depp, I'm not surprised that he won so many awards, because I've seen a lot of his movies. He really puts his heart into his work, just like Tim Burton does. Maybe that's why he's made so many movies with him. I don't know. But either way, I do think the awards were rightfully earned.
I definitely agree with you. I mean, let's face it, the movie became a success with positive reviews when it was released. I would like to say that both art director Dante Ferretti and set decorator Francesco Lo Schiavo deserves an Academy Award for Best Art Direction, because they made really good sets. I also say that this movie deserves to win 2 Golden Globes, one for Johnny Depp for Best Actor in a Motion Picture, Comedy, or Musical, and the other for Best Motion Picture in Comedy or Musical.
Also to note, after reading a certain entertainment magazine years ago, I realized that a few of the characters in this version look pretty similar to other Tim Burton characters. For example, Sweeney Todd looks almost like Edward Scissorhands, Mrs. Lovett looks like Sally from The Nightmare Before Christmas, and Adolfo Pirelli looks like an Italian version of Willy Wonka from Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. Oh, and speaking of Pirelli, for several years now, I also found him to be similar to Orin Scrivello DDS from Little Shop of Horrors, due to him being a character who appears in a couple scenes before getting killed off during the first half of the film, and he's never seen again afterwards.
You know, there might be a simple explanation as to why these characters resemble characters that Tim Burton had done in the past. It has been shown that many a times a director or an animator will kind of fall into the habit of creating characters that are similar to characters they've done before. We mostly see this in, like, anime characters. There are lots of characters who look like, well, one or another. I think he kind of does the same thing every now and again, like he kind of falls back on these notions. And, well, there you have it.
Well, there's not much I can say except that imagine there is a Burton-verse where one character meets another.
Plus, I think Anthony Hope is an underrated, but also a memorable character. Not just because he's young and handsome, but he's also very daring when it comes to saving Joanna from Judge Turpin. Guys, is there anything else you'd like to add to this?
No, not really, just that I totally agree with you. This is a very underrated character here.
In my opinion, I say that Anthony is a good character. He's kind of like a Prince Charming to Joanna, and he does want to rescue her from the evil judge. So yeah, I like the character. Once again, I'm gonna say that it is a very good movie that Tim Burton have ever created. And I bet that the late great Stephen Sondheim was proud of him when he made this movie. And so with all that said, if you enjoyed the Broadway stage musical of Sweeney Todd, the Demon Barber of Fleet Street, then you will love the movie. Also, be sure to check out the Sweeney Todd-esque music video of the song Bleeders performed by Black Veil Brides. It is an awesome music video, and we'll put in the link below so you can find it.
Anyway, with a terrifying and bloody film such as this, Sweeney Todd must truly be the Demon Barber of Fleet Street.
And to anyone